Hello. There's been a lot of talk lately about social media and how we're addicted to it. And I can say that's a true statement because I believe that I'm addicted to Facebook and YouTube. And I have been since 2006. I was reading an article this morning, and I made a comment on my Facebook page about the World Economic Summit or Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And there's a lot of people that are involved in that believe the same thing that most of us probably believe. If you believe that this social media is addictive, which it really is. I was telling my wife, well, I've told her quite a few times, but this morning, I just had lunch. I hope I don't have it all over my face. I was telling her this morning that I've almost become a hermit. But I'm a worldwide hermit. If you're on any of the social media sites and you have tons of people that you communicate with around the world, you can become an international hermit. Anybody that's really into this social media stuff knows exactly what I'm talking about. I'm using a small Sony digital recorder that I match up with my video. One thing about, or let me put it this way, one of the things that has happened to the internet, it has gotten, well, let me see, I want to say this the right way, not really taken over, but some people became so in tune to developing the internet that they have taken over. I don't think they were doing it intentionally. It was all a competitive thing. You just think. Let's see, I went to work in Oak Ridge in 1984, and the internet was just in the first stages. It was basically being used by academia. Some professors were talking to each other. I did a Facebook thing about this, not a video. I was just jabbering about it. When the internet started to come into its own, the company that I worked for hired a guy who worked in the cubicle right behind me, and the only job he had was to pursue the internet. And each morning when I came in, you would hear that if you go back to the dial-up days, you know the sound that I'm talking about. And there may be some people watching this video that still use dial-up. But I would hear that noise, and I knew what was going on, and occasionally I would talk to him. At that time, I could have gotten in on the ground floor. I don't know exactly what happened to him But I would say, because at that time he was investing in the stock market, he probably had enough forethought that when Google came along, he probably purchased stock in the company. And if he did, to a certain extent, he's probably a millionaire today. But the first terminal that I had in 1984, when I went to work at Oak Ridge, was attached to a mainframe. And a little later on, they gave us a desktop, which was running DOS. And then Windows 3.0 came along, and then Windows 3.1. We were running Oracle software that ran under DOS. And then Windows NT came along. Oracle upgraded their software. But what I want to mention, the guy that I worked for at Oak Ridge, I mean, he was brilliant. But he was one of these type of people that, and you know them, you may be one. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. You would go purchase something that you had to put together. And the first thing you'd do is throw away the instructions and just take it on your own to do it. And you'd either do it correctly or you'd have some parts left over. Well, he was that way with programming. He was so smart that he could just figure it all out himself. But when he would go to these seminars, he would bring back literature, and I'd read it cover to cover. And he went to one seminar, and at this time, Oracle was running under, I think it was Oracle 5, and then Oracle 6 came along that eventually ran under Windows. You know, I really can't remember, so I'm going to say Oracle 5. So when he came back, he had some literature, and I started to read the literature, and there was some information about something called Oracle Terminal. And I started reading that, and all of our input screens at work had this, you know, if you can date back to DOS, you know how the input screens on a database, usually people back then were using DBase, but Oracle was the premier relational database management system. But the screens had that, I want to say, pukey looking green and gray. But I found out through Oracle Terminal where you could make all of that pukey looking color pretty. So what I did is I created an Oracle Terminal, and I found out that when you launched an Oracle application, you could put that Oracle Terminal file in your command line, and lo and behold, you'd have input screens. Anybody that, when they started to access the Oracle database, if they had that file and put it in their command line, they had all these pretty colors. You could, like if you had a negative, I hope I'm not, I'm going to go ahead with this, and if it's boring, you just move on. But if you had a column, just for example, say that you had the column set to, if you entered anything more than, say, 55, it would usually beep at you and turn either a gray or a black. But with Oracle Terminal, if you exceeded the data that was supposed to go into the file, or you would be entering the data through a form. But what it would do is Oracle Terminal would either, whatever you created with the Oracle Terminal, you could have it to flash red, you could have it flash when it beeped, you could have it turn green or whatever color you wanted. So what I did is I took one of the applications, one of the company applications that the guy that I was working for that brought me the literature from the seminars, he had created a fairly sophisticated database. And we were using it throughout the company of Bechtel. Well, I mentioned the company. That's all right. It's true. So I normally don't like to drop names. But anyway, what I did is I took that Oracle Terminal and I had my input screen using the same input screen that everybody else was using in the company. But it looked like a Windows system. One of the managers came by one day and he happened, because at that time, no one in the office had a Windows operating system. We were all using DOS. And he came by and he saw all those pretty colors and he thought that I had circumvented the company and had installed Windows 3.0, which at that time was just coming online. He said, "How'd you get Windows?" I said, "I don't have Windows." He said, "What is that?" So I started to tell him, and as soon as I started to talk with him, speak with him, he knew what I had done. And then the word got around, so I started giving my file to everybody else in the company, especially that worked on my floor. So when they got ready to execute the program, they would put the command line of my file, which would go out to the mainframe in the company and pull that file in, and all of a sudden everybody had all these pretty colors. And the only reason that I was able to do that is because I like to read. Back during the time that I was working, I would take a 1,200-page manual on whatever I was going to scope out, and I'd read it word for word. And when you do that, it's like reading the instructions on putting something together. You'll find things in those manuals that most people, regardless of how smart they are as a programmer, they'll miss certain nuances of the database. Now, I'm not saying this egotistically. I'm making this video to just give an example of where we're at in some of these tech companies, and how I believe some of the tech companies have hired so many smart people from all around the world. I'm just wondering how many smart people they have who are looking over the shoulder of the programmers to make sure that they're not doing some funny business with algorithms. And as an example, I was reading a manual about the Oracle database, and in DOS you could, like if you wanted to copy a file or 2 or 3 files, you could put a command line in DOS and it would copy the files over to a different directory. Well, one day I saw my boss, and he was copying, and when he was working on a database and he was going to work offline or to make a copy of it or something, he was jumping through all kinds of hoops to do that. And I saw him one day do that, and I told him, I said, you can use the copy function to copy those tables over if you want to copy one over or two over or whatever, because Oracle was like SQL Server. If you're dealing with Access, if I own a copy of Access, when you program with Access, you're in a file server mode, which means that you've got to update the database when you're going to take change the structure of a file or a column. And he was doing something similar to that with Oracle, which is not a file server. And I said, all you got to do is use the copy function. So he instantly did it. He looked at me, and when I would tell him things like that, he'd always smile, because this guy could create some of the most fantastic enterprise databases that you could think of. He did one that had such a table structure. In his office, he had it, I don't know, completely, every wall was covered with a schema or schematic of the database. And I worked directly for him. Eventually, when he left the company, he hired me to go with him. But I was just thinking this morning about, if you're on the internet, it's easy to be paranoid because you think, well, are they really tracking what I'm doing, or they do this, or do they do that? And I think of an example. This is the way I think about whether someone's tracking you or whether anyone even cares what you're doing. If you're not doing anything illegal, I mean, if there's a friend that wanted to find out what files you have, or in other words, you got to look at it that there's certain things that it would take so much sophistication that anyone that would have the ability to do anything would not be worrying about what you've got. But the best way I can think about that is, and my wife and I, Pat, we were talking about it. When you go in to make a purchase and you have to sign for it, but you sign one of those electronic signature pads, I have never seen one that you could sign that looked like anything. And I've got to the point now to where I just scribble. And Pat told me this. She said someone asked her one day, well, how do you know that's me? That kind of signature. And she said, if you're never investigated, you don't have to worry about it. And if you're ever investigated, they'll know. And that's the way to look at computers. Most of you know that when you go onto Google, they capture all the sites that you go to, and you can delete them, but they're still in the system. But you can even go in now and pull your history up on the internet and delete it there. But always remember, nothing is ever deleted. We've been hearing in the news about what they lost 50,000 emails from this guy who was having an affair with one of his colleagues, and that whole thing is a mess. Let me tell you, nothing is ever deleted. even if you, now back in the old days, yes, but you can delete all the emails you want to delete, but somebody has them. And it's just a matter of who has those emails. So anyway, that's the main thing in the news right now. And I wanted to do a vlog. And of course, this vlog is a little long. But I've been thinking a while about doing more of these. I have started to place some things in text form for my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, if I ever have any, to where they will have a history of their ancestor. And I have tried before to do an oral history on video. And it's not that easy. Used to, I'd try to do it in an automobile, but as you can notice, the lighting that I'm using today is pretty clear. So I've kind of figured that out. And I don't know who I'll share my life with or not. If I sound not decisive what I'm saying is because I haven't decided for sure that I'll do that. But anyway, this is just a rambling. I wanted to talk about social media. Not that I'm an expert, but I think I know what's going on. And I really have a fear that the thing is already out of hand. This is probably going to make noise, but I need to change hands with this little tape recorder. I think everything is out of hand. But you can't do anything about it. The only thing you can do is just say, I'm going to get off the internet. I'm going to get off Facebook. I'm going to get off everything. I can't say that because being a hermit, an international hermit, what am I going to do? I would probably be better off getting off the internet, walking out the door, and you could probably see the lighting go down a little bit. I figured out how to use the sun to do the background lighting. But if I got off the internet, and that'd probably be a good thing, I would walk out the door, get in my car, and go do something productive. But anyway, it's just the thought. I'm sure some of you all that are listening to this jabbering are probably thinking, Frank, I'm just like you. I have just about made myself a hermit with the internet. So that's one of the prices you pay to live in the year 2018, the 21st century. And just think, some of us came from the 20th century. And I used to listen to the news and they'd talk about, well, in 2005 and 2012, 2018, this will be this way or that way. And I couldn't even imagine that far in the future. And now it's upon us. So, who knows what tomorrow will bring? Of course, I know that the Lord has the ages predestined, and He's in charge of all of it. So when you look at it that way, it's all in the Lord's hands. But we are a part of this generation, and we can't just sit back. We've got to be engaged in what's going on. But when all's said and done, the Lord's in control. Well, I know this is a long video. I'm trying to see don't know how long it is. I don't, my glasses, see if I can tell. Right now it's at 25 minutes and 54 seconds. So if you stuck around with us that long, I appreciate it. If not, I understand. We'll see you. Bye-bye.